It's not?
No, it's quite a development.
Okay.
Yes.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Today is October 13th, 2018.
Yes.
We are in Sun City, California, which is in between Los Angeles and San Diego. And we are at the house of Harriet Yellin, correct?
Yes.
And this interview will be about Saul Yellin, and about his participation in the War of Independence in 1948. And also he was a member of Mahal, correct?
Member of Mahal.
Aliyah Bet.
Yes.
Aliyah Bet.
Right.
And we're also going to talk about the book that you
Yes.
and Saul wrote together based on his memoirs. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I understood from your son that you are a school teacher by profession.
Yes.
So you're very thorough and you made some notes.
Yes.
And before we start to talk about Saul, can you please give me a brief introduction of who you are
Oh,
and where you're from?
I'm Harriet Yellin, better known as Honey, and I grew up in New York in Borough Park. And after spending 1 year in California on a farm, on a training farm, to go to live on a kibbutz in Israel, I ended up in Baltimore, Maryland, and lived in Baltimore until 1991. I married Saul in 1968, and he was very excited about what he had done to help get the Holocaust survivors to Israel.
And you were born in Brooklyn, correct?
Yes.
Borough Park?
Well, I was born in New York City, actually, but I lived in Borough
You
Park.
lived in Borough Park. Hold on a second, I'm just trying to do a little something here. Okay. In Borough Park.
Yes.
That's where you grew up, correct?
Yes.
Just one more second. I'm just trying one more thing here. Tell me where and when Saul was born, his full name.
Saul was born on June 18th, 1924, in Baltimore, Maryland.
And where were his parents from?
His parents were Russia, I think, the Russia-Polish border, probably. And his mother died when he was very young. And the father they had 4 children. His brother Sid, who was captain of the Hatikva, and 2 sisters. And it was very difficult. And then he married again, and that mother died. And so it was very difficult for him, and Saul and Sid ended up in an orphanage. The girls went to foster homes, but he grew up. But even when he was home, they were very, very poor. His father was a tailor, and it was a difficult way to make a living at that time. And they were so poor that they used to wonder when the plate went around the table whether there would be any food left for them by the time it got to them. So he had a tough childhood. He enlisted in the Navy right after Pearl Harbor.
So if he was born in 1920, okay.
Well,
did he belong? So did he go to a Jewish orphanage?
Pardon me?
Was it a Jewish orphanage that he went to?
I guess so. And we knew other people who had been in that orphanage. It was not an uncommon thing for people who couldn't take care of their children to put them into an orphanage. It was not a foster home. It was pretty much
Was he okay with his father? Did they have an okay relationship?
Oh yeah, they had a very good relationship.
They just couldn't take care of them.
But they just couldn't manage.
They couldn't manage.
Yeah, because the mother died, and then the woman he married died. Eventually he married again, but by that time I think the kids were all out.
Out of the house. I'm gonna just put your glasses right here for a second.
Well, I want to keep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And about is there anything that we should know about his early childhood besides that?
Yeah, he was the baby. And they all took advantage of him, especially his brother Sid. For instance, Sid used to take him to the park and lose him. And then the police would find him and he'd get an ice cream cone, and then they'd bring him home. Yeah, so that's kind of, yeah.
Sid was his older brother?
Sid was the older brother, yes.
Older brother, yeah.
And then with 2 sisters.
2 sisters, yeah. Now, did he go to high school? Did he?
Yes, he dropped out of high school right after, when Pearl Harbor happened, and his father had to sign for him because he was only 17, and he joined the Navy.
He joined the Navy.
And the way he tells it, he was in for 4 years. He landed on every island in the Pacific.
He was in the Pacific.
He was a coxswain, I think it's called, the ones that take the landing ship to the shore and make the people get off. So he stands there with a gun while everybody gets off, then he goes back and gets another load.
He drove the boat?
Well, he was standing there and make sure they got off the boat. I don't think he drove the boat, but he was, yeah.
Those were like landing craft
boats. Right.
They used them in Normandy and on the islands and everything.
Well, but all the islands in the Pacific, he said he was on every island in the Pacific. Oh, yeah.
Was he injured in the Navy?
Pardon me?
Was he injured in the Navy or something? Did he have any stories that you remember him telling you?
A lot of stories about anti-Semitism, to be honest, in the Navy.
In the Navy, really?
In the Navy, yes. In fact, they never called his name when they called the roll. They called Hebe. Hebe. And one of them was so vicious and so anti-Semitic that one night when the guy was drunk and coming down the stairs, they beat the hell out of him. And he was not so anti-Semitic after that. I'm guessing Saul was the only Jew on the ship.
Do you know what the ship was that he was on, that he was attached to in the Pacific? No.
No, I don't know. No.
And he spends 4 years in the Navy?
Yeah, and he loved it, but he got out because his brother got out, because everybody got out of the service, so he figured that was the thing to do.
His brother Sid was also in the Navy?
He was not in the Navy. Sid, I think, may have been in the Merchant Marines. I don't remember, but I think he was in the Merchant Marines.
But they were both in the Navy, Merchant
Marines? They were in the service,
Marines?
yeah. So when one got out, everybody figured that was the thing to do.
Okay.
You know, he never went back to school. He was never interested in going back to school. He was a terrific businessman, and he always had good ideas. He always made a good living. So he never felt like it was necessary for him to go to school. He made sure I kept going to school. I have several masters and a doctorate.
In what?
Doctorate in New Age psychology.
Wow.
Yeah. So
after the Navy, he gets out of the Navy in 1945, 46?
Well, Pearl Harbor was 41, so some 4 years, yeah.
Yeah, 40, let's say 45.
Yeah, something like that, right.
And where does he move? Where does he go to after the war?
Well, he stayed in Baltimore. He got married because his brother got married.
Okay.
So he married his brother's wife's best friend.
Okay.
Did not work out. It was a terrible marriage. They had 2 children who came to live with us when we married, but it was not, you know, not meant to be. But he was always excellent in business.
Now, this book that you wrote with Sid, how did you guys start to work on this, and when?
Well, I was very interested in what he had done because I was a Verbrannte Zionist. I was in Habonim, and that was how I ended up on the training farm on the Chavah to go to live on a kibbutz. So I was very excited about what he had done. And that was how we became interested. The way we wrote the book, he would tell me something about it every day. We'd go out to breakfast, and then I would write about it, and then when he'd come home at night, I would read what I had written each day. So that was how we wrote it. We wrote the book in 1967, and we finished it after our first trip to Israel, right after the '67 war. Now, we didn't print the book until I think it was 95. And we sold out. We did several lecture tours.
Really?
In California and Arizona. And it's available on Amazon, by the way, now.
So tell me, how does Sid get involved?
Pardon me?
How does Sid get involved after the war in coming to Palestine and helping out? How does he get involved?
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
How does Sid get involved with coming to Israel? How does it start?
Oh, well, let me tell you the story.
Okay.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
And away we go.
And away we go.
Here's our book.
Okay.
And okay. HaTikva, Song of Hope by Harriet Yellin, PhD. The story of the ship HaTikva as told by Saul Yellin. The HaTikva was the fourth of 10 ships manned by American and Canadian volunteers in the so-called illegal immigration fleet used to break the British blockade of Palestine in 1946 and 48. And I just want to mention something about the Balfour Declaration, which was the reason for people wanting to go to live in Palestine as a Jewish homeland. The Balfour Declaration was the result of Baron Rothschild saving the Bank of England. And when they asked him what he would like in return, he said he would like a Jewish homeland. And the British had the mandate after the Turkish left, so this was feasible. They were supposed to do it, only it never happened. So this is the story. The HaTikva was the fourth of 10 ships manned by American and Canadian volunteers in the so-called illegal immigration fleet used to break the British blockade of Palestine in 1946 to 48. These events have been commemorated by a plaque in the Smithsonian Institute, which reads, "In tribute to the spirit of their mission and the courage of their passengers," and the dedication was on July 1967 in Washington, D.C. This is the text of a plaque that we received from the refugees. The children of Israel wandered for 40 years on the desert after they had gone out of Egypt. Then no one survived who could remember the flesh pots of Egypt, the passage of the Red Sea, or how Moshe stretched out his hand over the sea and divided it. Only the second generation entered the promised land. We are more fortunate. 40 years have passed since we left the diaspora. Almost all of these years we have lived in the promised land with our children and grandchildren. We recollect not only the horrors of the diaspora's Holocaust, we remember also those wonderful people who stretched out their hands and divided the sea for us, who gave us the hope, HaTikva. More than that, we can express our thanks and assure you that our children and grandchildren know and appreciate your pioneer spirit and goodwill, which made you volunteer for the Aliyah Bet ships. 40 years have passed since our exodus. We did not cross the sea on dry ground, but we have survived and live in the promised land with our children and grandchildren. Thank you for bringing us here. July 1987. The history of mankind has often been written in blood, lest we forget the courage of the survivors who still bear tattooed numbers on their arms, people who never gave up hope or their desire for a better life. We must remember their story and the brave young men who made their dream a reality. And this is a quote from Saul. I will never forget the thrill when one Jew was able to reach out to help another Jew as they boarded our ship. And what's interesting is that they had no Jewish background. His father was what was called a freethinker. When they came from Europe, a lot of Jewish people felt like they had to throw away all the old ways to become real Americans, and they threw out the baby with the bathwater. So he had no religious background whatsoever, but he had a real feeling for the Jewish people.
Now, I want to ask you, before the book and everything, I see that you also made notes.
Yes.
Which I would like to more focus on your notes because it's better for me for you than for you to read out of a.
Well, I'm not going to read a lot.
No, but I'm saying, how does Saul get the idea in his head after the Second World War that he has to do this?
Well, they came to Baltimore looking for experienced seamen to connected in some way. There was quite an underground movement. There was a Dr. Seidel who was very involved with this, and they pretty much knew people there. Baltimore is kind of small townish, and they knew who was who. And since they had just gotten out of the Navy and all of this, they were asked if they would go. And for him, it was a challenge. You know, it was not only because it was the Jewish people and he wanted to do something special, but it was a challenge, I think, you know, to defy the British, to do something dangerous. The Exodus also left from Baltimore. The Exodus left right after our ship.
What are the notes that you made there? I'd like to...
Pardon me?
I see that you made some notes.
Yes, I did, because it makes it easier.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll just read a tiny bit of this to give us a little background.
Please.
Blood-soaked dream of millions, the vision of the homeland shone in the hearts of our human cargo. 1,400 souls. Now, according to the museum in Israel, they say 1,600 passengers were on there, crammed together within the narrow confines of our tiny, fragile ship. Her name, Hatikva, Hope. Her destiny, Palestine. Our ship was the fourth American vessel to join the chain of illegal carriers of human contraband. We were living a fact that denied all logic and defied British law in order to uphold the higher laws of humanity. In March 1947, the Trade Winds, as she was then known, began her perilous adventure in Florida, where she was picked up by the man who was to be her captain. They used an American captain, so if the ship was captured, he would not get into trouble until they got to Europe. It was a devious route.
So the American captain took the boat across the Atlantic, basically?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It was a devious route, a Coast Guard cutter called the North Wind. The ship had been used as an icebreaker and was now converted to serve a very different purpose. She was small, about 740 tons, but strong and sturdy and considered seaworthy. North Wind had been sold to Canada when the United States Navy felt that she had outlived her purpose. They left Baltimore without incident, and
so Saul leaves. Saul is on the ship. It's called Hatikva.
It was called, I think, the Trade Winds, the North Wind,
the North
Wind. And then the Trade Winds. The new name was the Trade Winds, and they were flying under a Honduran flag with an American captain.
And they left from Baltimore?
They left from Baltimore.
And Saul and his brother
and some other
guys,
people from Baltimore area, and also from New York, from the East Coast.
And they were going probably to Marseille, or something like that.
Pardon me?
Their first destination was to cross the Atlantic and probably get to Marseille.
They had to refit the ship to hold the refugees.
Right, they had to build it.
So they stopped in Portugal. To do that,
okay.
and I think they refueled in the Azores.
In the Azores, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So they stopped in Portugal.
Do you know the date that they leave Baltimore?
Pardon me?
The date.
I don't know the date, but I know the Exodus, which left in March. They had a lot of trouble. They almost sank in the Baltimore harbor, so it had to be before that, but not too much before that, I don't think.
Okay.
Okay. Now the next stop was Port Dubuque, France, and
what was the next stop?
Port Dubuque, France.
Okay.
And that was where the American captain left, and Saul's brother Sid became captain. And it was used as a Jewish naval base. It was sort of a headquarters of the Haganah. It was a center of secret activities. And one of the things they did while they were in Port Dubuque, they took on board 6 what were called shushu boys. Now they were on the most wanted list of terrorists in Palestine at that time. They were never supposed to come back, and they had somehow managed to escape.
Do you know the names?
And I don't know, but there were 6 of them, and they came on board, and they were known for acts of terrorism against the British.
And you have no idea who these people were, or who they were affiliated with, if they were affiliated with...
Haganah.
They were affiliated with Haganah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And the next stop was La Spezia, Italy, where they came to pick up their passengers. The passengers were brought to the ship in small boats. Now, many of them had walked all over Europe to get there, or had walked to meet trucks. Now the trucks, I read another book recently that told about that they were members of the Jewish Brigade, and they were part of the British Army, and they were the ones who brought a lot of these refugees. Absolutely. I had never known how they got there. The guy that
I interviewed right before I came here,
yeah,
was in the Jewish Brigade.
Oh, really?
Right now, in LA.
Oh, how interesting.
And he told that story of how they brought Jews from Belgium down to France in trucks.
From all over. Right. That's amazing. Okay, 120.
So where's the place in Italy again that they pick up the refugees?
La Spezia, Italy. La Spezia, L-A-S-P-E-Z-I-A, 2 words.
Okay.
And then they made other stops in Italy.
Now, did Saul ever talk to you about the first time that he saw these Holocaust refugees?
I want to read you a little bit about that.
Okay.
Almost immediately after we reached the appointed spot, the little boats began to come up to us out of nowhere. We could see nothing. Our passengers boarded at the fantail swiftly and silently, guided only by their own keen instincts for self-preservation. Hundreds upon hundreds moved in a mass from out of the sea into the comparative safety of the Hatikva. Now this part is very touching to me. As they passed the sailors, some of the refugees reached out to touch their saviors or to mutter something in a tongue unknown to the others, and said, Mashiach, Mashiach, that they were the Messiah who had come to save them. It seemed as if all humanity was boarding. Our ship was in the eerie stillness around us. Okay. After a few days out, a British destroyer started to, a plane spotted them, and then a British destroyer started to follow them.
This is, do we have a date of when this is going on? This is 47, March 47?
This is 47.
March 47?
Well, probably
February?
earlier, February, maybe January.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the 6 ships began to close in on us. And they finally, now this was after they, all right. All at once, the 6 ships began to close in on us. When we knew that we had been identified as an illegal ship, we gathered everyone who could fit up on deck and hoisted the blue and white Star of David proudly above our ship. The Song of Hope, Hatikva, was sung with great spirit by some, but many had tears streaming down their faces. Now, they had successfully gotten to Haifa Harbor. So that was when the British attacked them. We asked all the refugees to return below deck. They were afraid that they were going to capsize because they were running from one side to the other. One of the destroyers tried to ram us and succeeded in heaving the bow anchor through the wooden enclosure. they did not sink the ship. The refugees managed to disembark, and they one of the things they did, they sabotaged the ship. They destroyed the engines before they got off, so they couldn't send them back on the ship.
Yeah.
And from there, they were sent to Cyprus on a ship called the Empire Lifeguard. And while they were in Cyprus, the Exodus was sent back to Europe. The refugees were sent back to the same places they came from. So I don't know how long they were in Cyprus, but they had to come in by the quota system. Now, when they got into Haifa Harbor, some of them had just jumped into the water and gotten ashore and swam ashore. But most of them,
Saul?
no, they stayed on the ship and they ended up in Cyprus. And in retaliation for the Exodus, the Haganah asked them, when they were going back from Cyprus to Palestine, if they would let them, they taped dynamite on their backs to blow up the ship. And the idea behind blowing up the Empire Lifeguard was because they wanted to use their own ships to bring refugees so they could do the head count on bringing people from Cyprus into Palestine. So with dynamite taped on their backs, they got safely into the harbor, and as soon as everybody was off the ship imploded, went down into Haifa Harbor, and it is still there. And they were taken to athlete detention camp from there.
So he was in Cyprus?
They were in Cyprus. They had to wait for the quota, and I don't know how long they were in Cyprus, but what they did, they set up little stands where they were selling things that they had, and they had quite an interesting life in Cyprus. I don't know how long they were there.
And then when they came back, they blew up the British ship.
They blew up the ship.
After everybody got off.
Yes.
Was Saul part of...
Oh yeah, he had dynamite taped on his back. And the reason being in retaliation for the Exodus.
Now, they sent him to Athlete, which is a prison.
No, Athlete is not a prison. Athlete was a detention camp.
A detention camp, yeah.
Yeah. So they were an Athlete for quite a while, and they kept interrogating them to find out who blew up the ship. And this went on for a very long time. And what happened is that all of a sudden, Saul and Sid and two other boys were arrested by the British and taken to Accra prison.
To Akko prison?
Accra prison.
Akko.
A-C, yeah.
Yeah, Akko,
yeah, Akko,
sure,
right.
Sure.
A-C-R-E in English.
Really?
Yes. Yes, they were taken to Accra prison. And when I visited their cell, it was right opposite the gallows, by the way. And you know Accra prison, where they've got the statues of the men walking, this is what they used to do. This was the only time they let them out of their cells, was to walk around the courtyard. But what we never knew was why those four were chosen to go there. And they thought they were going to be hung because this was what the British were doing at that time. As it turned out, they were deported. And I don't know how long they were in Accra prison, but I did have a copy of the letter telling when they were going to be deported from Accra prison. And that was, you know, one of the terrible things about it is that we never knew. Now, when we went to Israel in 1967, we went to see one of the shipmates, who by then was a very famous artist in Israel. And he told us that the reason they chose, well, I don't think they liked Sid. He was kind of pushy and pretty good at putting other people down. So that may have had something to do with it. But they felt that the only way they would leave the others alone was if they gave them some names. And the reason they're supposed to have chosen these four, according to Sonny Weintraub, was because they had 2 Harvard men on the ship, and they made a big deal out of them, and they were supposed to be better than everybody because they dropped out of Harvard to do this, and they were the ones who suggested Saul and Sid and the other 2 boys. So that was what we found out when we went to Israel in 1967.
20 years later.
Until then, we didn't. Now, I tried to get more information and kind of a confirmation. One of the people who's been very active with doing things about all the mechanics. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention is that Saul is buried at Bet Shemesh, which is right next to the Michal Memorial. So we thought that was very fitting, and we do have a marker on his grave that tells about bringing 1,600 Holocaust survivors to Israel.
So what happened after Akko prison? They were deported. Where were they deported to?
They went to New York, and then they were allowed to return to Baltimore. Oh, and they came to New York, I think it was in December, and they were in shorts from being in Israel, and shorts and maybe no shoes. And they went to they went somewhere, American Consulate maybe, or someplace to see if they could get them some clothes. So finally they took them to Bloomingdale's and bought them some clothes before they sent them home. But they were allowed to go back to Baltimore. Now, unfortunately, one of them, Leo Schlefstein, died shortly after. The prison apparently was a big strain on him.
Really? Were they tortured? Were they beaten?
I don't know.
Ever told you about this?
No, but I know that one of them died, so only 3 of them went back, and the third one was also from Baltimore. I don't remember his name, but I did know him. I did meet him. Now, I would like to read just the very end of this. This was when we were in Israel, in Tel Aviv. We looked out at the beautiful Mediterranean, and it was so clear you could see all the way to Jaffa. A miracle unfolded before our eyes. The conclusion was before us, close enough to touch. It was there because we made it happen. Emerging from the tragic bloodbath of 6 million Jews and built upon the fervent hopes of those who remained, Israel was alive today. There will be other wars, other tragic confrontations, but tiny Israel would remain as a symbol of the struggles of humanity brought to a glorious fruition. We shall not abandon you. The real goal beckons and points to the future, not only for Israel, but for all nations. Today it exists only as a dream within the hearts of men, but the ancient prophecy that was given to this land shall one day become a reality. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. Baruch Hashem. End of story. Do you have any questions?
I have a lot of questions.
Okay.
Hold on a second. I'm just going to stop for a second. I want you to go over your notes for a sec that you made.
I think I've pretty much gone through.
I want to just make sure that,
that
we covered the notes that you made, because that's very important for our process. And take your time. There's no rush.
It's interesting that you just interviewed the guy that was involved with the Jewish Brigade.
Insane.
That's pretty much everything I had.
He never talked to you about his time in Akko prison, about what the British did to him?
Oh yeah, but you know, there's nothing, it's prison.
What did they do?
I don't, be honest, I don't remember. I know they were confined to a very small cell, there was nothing in it, And I don't even know if they went out for meals. I don't remember. They went out for meals or if they put the meals in there.
Do you know roughly how long they were in Aqua
No,
prison?
I have
Was it a
no
week?
time
Was it-
frame. The only thing I know is that he came back in December, but I don't know that it was the next December or it could have been
So he
December
went-
a
so he
year
went-
later.
so I'm just trying to figure out his journey. From Baltimore, he went to New York. From New York to the Azores.
No. They left from Baltimore
From Baltimore to the Azores.
to the Azores.
And then they went to France.
And then they were in Portugal for refitting the ship to make shelves.
Right.
Oh yeah, it was supposed to be a banana boat. That was what the shelves were supposed to be, for bananas.
Interesting you say that.
But they were for the people to sleep on. And then they went to La Spezia where they picked up, and other ports in Italy. I don't know the names of the other ports, but other ports in Italy. And then they had several British destroyers following them, but they did get to Haifa Harbor. And as I say, some of them jumped off and swam to shore. And the others remained, were taken to Cyprus. So that I think is pretty much it. Unless you have other questions.
No, I think we're good. I'm going to take some photographs of the book.
Oh, good.
And if you have any photos of Sid, there's one there.
I don't have pictures of
No.
Sid. The ones I have are in the locker, unfortunately. I expected to have another room here, so I've got a locker with a lot of personal stuff in it. Yeah, but that's a nice picture of
I'm
Saul.
going to take a picture of that, and I'm going to